Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas and hello, everyone. Welcome back to this Christmas special edition of the Silver Screen podcast. If you haven't been keeping up with our socials and things, as always, this is your announcement that this week we're going to be reviewing the movie Die Hard. And we will be figuring out once and for all, yeah, right, whether it can be called a Christmas movie. But, you know, it's on my Christmas special, so that's maybe a hint. But I can never do these reviews alone. I'm always joined by at least one guest, and I'm joined by a guest returning from my Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast this week, all the way from Spain. Special guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm DK. I'm a part-time author, as best I can be anyway, and just generally an all-round nerd.
Awesome. And we've been having a little discussion about sort of not being able to get to the cinema and stuff lately. So I know you're a bit of a cinephile, so that's good. And yeah. We have confirmed we've both recently watched Die Hard. In your case, very recently.
And, about 30 minutes ago now.
Awesome. And so that seems like a good place to start then. So what is your history with Die Hard? Is this the first time you've seen it, or have you seen it lots? And when was the first time you saw it? Can you remember?
I can't remember the specific first instance that I watched it, but it must have been not long after it came out on video. I wasn't a big... I mean, I like the sci-fi epics and I like the fantasy and all that kind of thing, but I was never that big on action movies. The whole Schwarzenegger, Stallone thing, unless they were set in, situations that I like the sci-fi setting.
Like Total Recall and things like that, yeah.
Yeah, I loved that. And even the first couple of Rocky films, I know it's not sci-fi, it's fantastical, obviously, but...
yeah, it's kind of wish fulfillment fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah. But when it came to things like Rambo and Commando, they just left me cold. The idea of these big action heroes just walking through explosions without a scratch, they just didn't interest me. But when I saw Die Hard, I saw Bruce Willis, and at that point, Bruce Willis it was kind of his first big film, really.
Yeah,
and,
it was, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, okay, this is an action hero I can kind of get behind, because he literally has the crap kicked out of him throughout this film, and it shows. He doesn't.
He goes through it.
Yeah, he doesn't just brush it off and come out with some really stupid quip like, I don't know, Commando. And I'm going to get such a lot of hate for saying that, but I could just never take to Commando with Schwarzenegger.
No, I'm with you. I'm similar in that I like the kind of sci-fi and fantastical stuff, and I'm a fan of some of the dumb stuff. I'm a big Schwarzenegger fan, but fully acknowledge that, films like the likes of Commando, or I know it's not Schwarzenegger, but the likes of Universal Soldier and stuff that get a lot of love, and I'm always just like, I've seen them once. I never really need to watch them ever again.
Exactly. It's not something I would. If someone made me on pain of death, I would sit down and watch Universal Soldier again. The sequels. Probably not, but the first one, but I just never took to it. But when I watched Die Hard, everyone in that production seemed to be at the top of their game, and I just became pretty obsessed with it. I ended up getting the video games and got the box set.
Well, I'm not going to get into too much detail yet because we'll give our full review at the end and stuff. But I'm the same. I was kind of cold with action movies, and then one of the ones that changed my mind for me links to Die Hard because it's the same director, which was the film Predator. Exactly. I was like, this I can get on board with because you can kind of tell it's well directed and it's got obviously that sci-fi element, but that's not overpowering. Plus it's just so quotable, and we all kind of walked around school, which was probably too early to be watching it, saying things like, "Oh, what's wrong, Dylan? Pushing too many pencils and stuff like that." You know?
Everybody wishing that they could, when they shake hands with a friend, you could have arms like Carl Weathers and Schwarzenegger.
Exactly. Yeah, Carl Weathers at the start of the movie, not halfway through. Spoiler alert.
No. Yeah, shake hands at that point.
As I say, I'm the same. I came to Die Hard kind of late in the grand scheme of things in terms of like action movies and stuff that I'd seen, because by that point I'd seen like Predator and a few others, and I hadn't really seen it all that much, but I had seen it like on TV, like in the background a couple of times, and I definitely did have it on DVD at one point. But I bought the Blu-ray years ago, and yesterday for this podcast is the first time I'd actually sat and watched the Blu-ray start to finish.
Wow.
So, as I say, I had seen the movie, but that was the first time I'd really been like, right, I'll focus on this and give it my undivided and really watch it. And so I have some thoughts, but I wanted to start out with a little bit of history regarding the movie, because I think it's kind of weirdly fascinating how the film came about.
Yeah.
Which, in case any of our listeners don't know, it was basically a sequel to a book that already existed. The book, I think, is called something like Who Goes There? By Roderick Thorpe, and it's a sequel to a book called The Detective, which was made into a film starring Frank Sinatra. And because of that, it means that first refusal for this film was offered to a 71-year-old Frank Sinatra, which I just find to be hilarious. There's some kind of alternate universe somewhere where a 71-year-old sort of aging crooner is playing the version of John McClane.
I would pay real money to see that. That just must be phenomenal.
Just like, we'll come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But obviously, the 71-year-old Sinatra passed on his option. So, and then a lot of changes were made from the book to the film Die Hard that it ultimately became. Not least because the book is incredibly depressing, and the director and screenwriters wanted to move away from that and make a more fun action movie, which is, I think, one of the things that that stands out for the film. It's definitely violent, but it never seems cynical with it. I was shocked to discover that, like I said, the character that became John McClane, who's got a different name, obviously, in the book, but he goes out to New York not to visit his wife, but to see his daughter, who's like a really struggling drug addict who's going through hard times and stuff. And it's kind of it's very different. And the fact that without wanting to spoil it in case anybody does want to read the novel, it doesn't necessarily end very happily for the protagonist. So that it became this film is very weird, and I think it owes a lot to what's his name again, John McTiernan, who said that he agreed to do the film only if it was more lighthearted and less of the kind of mean spirit and the anger or whatever that you would normally find. Hang on, I've got the actual quote here. He agreed to direct on the condition the film would have some joy and not simply contain mean, nasty acts seen in other terrorist films. Which is why the terrorists were kind of changed to be just basic robbers, I think, ultimately as well. But yeah, so I think all those changes really did help to make the film a lot better. But the other thing, and this kind of ties in a little bit to the debate about is Die Hard a Christmas movie, is that the studio basically were wanting to ride a high of like action movies and stuff that were big at the time and wanted a huge summer blockbuster. And the film was released in July of, I think, 1988. Yeah, 1988, and it was intended to be that summer kind of big action movie. But again, we'll get into it as I go through in chronological order, as I always do, because one thing I did do, apologies if it gets annoying, but I did do something called Christmas Watch, where I tried to make a note of everything in the film that was Christmas related to point out all the instances when it becomes important. And there's quite a lot, So.
It wasn't until today when someone walked in the room while I was watching the thing and said, "This is a Christmas movie. She's called Holly," and then walked back out.
That literally never even occurred to me.
Yeah,
yes,
no,
exactly.
I've been watching it all these years, and he never twigged.
Wow, that is something that I don't think I've even ever heard come up in these arguments, but that might be the mic drop moment right there. That's awesome. Right, so as I say, I'll go through the film. I've got like sort of chronological notes, and obviously I'll just banter back and forth and shoot some questions your way. And if you've got anything you want to kind of interrupt me or say about them, then the drill. So
yeah, sure.
That's great. So the film starts with kind of introducing the character of John McClane, and he's nervous flying and white knuckling it. It's basically you get the immediate setup as to why he's going to end up in bare feet later, which is one of the many layers of crap that he has to get through to navigate the situation, which is quite cleverly set up in its own way. And the scene itself is good because it gives you all the explanation you need that he is, he's a cop, but he's not like superhuman and not scared of anything. And he's been a cop for 11 years, but he's from New York traveling to LA, and it gets kind of all of that out of the way, which I like.
Yeah.
Christmas watch number 1 here. The teddy bear looks like it's being wrapped as a gift, and on the plane there is a definite announcement of Merry Christmas as they leave. As we cut straight back to the Nakatomi Plaza party, there are obviously Christmas trees all over it. The speech definitely has Christmas wishes, and Holly makes multiple references to Christmas while Ellis is hitting on her, including pointing out that it's Christmas Eve. So there you
go. They're really hammering it home.
At this point, yeah, I was quite surprised. I was like, wow, they're really starting off like, okay, wow, we know it's definitely Christmas Eve. We got it. But yeah, I also like that kind of, it gives you the good setup of Ellis's character, that he's kind of creepy and, even though he knows that Holly is kind of married, he's kind of hitting on her and trying to pull her that way. But, yeah. And also, this is the first instance of the film's sort of slightly wry humor, because I'm talking when it's really out of nowhere and has nothing to do with the film, but talking about, like, do you think it'd be all right to give this baby a little nip of alcohol to get it off to sleep? And Holly's reply of, it looks like that baby's ready to 10 bar. Yeah. It's apropos of nothing, but it's still pretty funny, The one thing that did kind of throw me with this film, but it took me a while to realize the reason why, is that the like Holly and the kids having a Spanish maid, even though played by an Italian actress, because I was like, this is hardly an everyman sort of situation, but then it becomes apparent that that's the whole point of the division between Holly and John, is that she's like become successful and a bit more rich than he is, really, and she's living a high life that he's not necessarily accustomed to. And maybe there's a little bit, again, many film critics have made sort of studies better than I could about, like, this film could be about the traditional role of masculinity and feeling emasculated by a woman taking the position of power, and basically him having to reclaim his masculinity through violence and saving the damsel, I guess, in that way. And yeah, I can see it if you want to see it that way, fair enough. But it was just weird that all came to me just from that one sort of couple of setup type scenes, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember all of this now. So yeah, the last little bit of setup then is just as John meets Argyle and points out that it's the first time he's driven in a limo, but it's also the first time that Argyle has drove one. Which I don't really necessarily love the character of Argyle. He doesn't seem to have a ton of a point in the movie.
Oh, you're kidding. He's my favorite character.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Why is that then?
I used to hate him, but as I watched it more and more, every time he's on screen, I love it. He exudes Christmas to me.
Well, that is true. He is he's Mr. Christmas because, and again, Christmas watch, I'll throw them all out at once here. It's him that plays Run DMC's Christmas in Hollis on the radio and points out that it is Christmas music. He's the one having a little mini Christmas party in the limo, and we'll get to it at the very end, but he gives the kind of sign-off line of the film, which re-emphasizes that it is Christmas. So, yeah, I can see that, but I think I just got more and more frustrated that he was just completely oblivious to what was going on for the bulk of the movie,
See, I like that. I can identify with that because most of the time I feel oblivious to what's going on around me. So I can identify with him as a character.
That's fair enough. And I do kind of love his sarcastic shut up to the teddy bear when he's feeling judged at the kind of midway point. Yeah. Well, fair enough. I can dig it. Yeah. This is apropos of nothing, but I just found it amusing that when they're talking about all of the kind of mod cons that the limo has and stuff, and Argyle's like, "You wouldn't believe it, man. It's got like VHS." I was like, "Ooh, wow, top of the range." You can watch a VHS tape while you're driving. Yay. One kind of sort of film nerd type note that I made at this point, because it's kind of it comes up a lot here, is that I love the cinematography of the movie, the way that everything's like lit and the scenes all look like they're happening almost like at dusk and there's a golden hour kind of feel to it.
It is very, very beautiful to look at.
It is, surprisingly, for an action movie, as I say, the way that it's filmed and the way that it's given that mood, I guess, is really cool. And I think part of that is because one of the editor/cinematographers was a guy called Jan de Bont, who became a director, who later went on to direct Speed, weirdly enough. And I had read somewhere that this is it was on this film that he got the idea for the opening of Speed because of the elevator scene, which is why it's similar type idea. But yeah, I think those kind of Eastern European sensibilities make it look a little bit kind of. It's very cleverly edited in that way that it keeps moving and it just looks sumptuous to look at. So definitely worth noting.
I think the editing is just on point throughout this entire movie, and I don't think it ever gets any recognition. And I think the way it's been edited, I mean, the direction is fantastic. The script just sparkles for an action film. Anyway, it sparkles to me. The acting's great, but nobody ever really pays attention to the editing, and I think it's edited perfectly for an action film. There's just no let up. Once the initial setup is out of the way, it just clicks.
Yeah, I completely agree. There is some stuff, but you kind of have to go hunting for it, because I did, when I was doing research for the episode, I came across a few, like, as I said, critic type essays that are written about how they completely agree with you. Basically, the editing doesn't get enough recognition, and how, as I said, Jan de Bont was, incredibly skilled and a huge part of why this film moves the way it does and feels the way that it does. And the credit is out there, but you have to go really looking in sort of film geek circles, I think, for it. But definitely worth noting. Yeah. Awesome. So as I said, we get like set up about from the conversations with Argyle that there's marriage trouble between Holly and John, and again, it's clever exposition, because it's not like it stops the story dead. It's melds with the character stuff, which I like.
Yeah, and they kind of get it all out of the way in the first 20 minutes or so. So then
they do.
It's apart from the scene between John and Al later on when he's in the bathroom. It just never lets up.
Yeah, there's one scene that I thought was a little bit it stopped the pace a little bit at the very start, which I may as well mention now. And it's basically when John and Holly are having their little argument in what looks like a hotel room, but it's obviously in the plaza somewhere. And it was just kind of like, for me, it just went on a bit too long, and it was reiterating stuff we knew, but at the same time, I guess we needed it so that we could see that they were still in that place, I guess.
Yeah, kind of prickly towards each other, especially when Holly's assistant comes in, and he's kind of a bit dismissive of her, and it does. You are right in that sense. It does seem to drag on, and it is retreading. But I guess you have to have some interplay between, John and Holly in order to get their relationship. Otherwise, it won't have that setup when eventually. I think
it seems like it's not difficult to get to, but it's a little bit like, oh, this has slowed things a little bit. But I think you're right; it pays off toward the end of the movie, and that's why it's there. So I can understand from a filmmaking point of view why you wouldn't lose it. So again, I can dig it. But in terms of sort of clever exposition to get things across, I love as well how it's part of the plot that he looks on the computer to find Holly, and that's how he finds out that she's using her maiden name. Because that could so easily have been like something that would take forever to explain or become a huge thing, but it's done so sort of just quickly enough to have an impact and so that you can notice it without feeling like, well, why did you drop that on us there, kind of thing. And it's also in that same scene at the lobby that they point out that the party are the only ones left in the building, which is kind of convenient for the audience to know, because otherwise sheer number of hostages and casualties would have been ridiculous
off the charts.
Yeah, for a multi sort of level building that they're in, it would have been ridiculous. But you do kind of wonder if they knew that the party was going to be there, or if like Gruber and company just expected there to be nobody, though, which is weird.
Yeah. And again, referring back to the cutting edge technology of VHS, the fact that he goes into an office block and he looks something up on a computer, and back then you were just thinking, whoa, this is a modern building. This is almost futuristic.
Yeah, but then you look at the computer now, and it's so dated. It's like one of the old. But at the time, as you said, it would have been like what?
It's the stock sound effects that they had for computers all throughout that decade. I don't know if you picked up on that, but it's the same noises the same noises on the computer that they use in Superman 3.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I didn't, but the thing it reminded me of was the movie The Thing, which has the really supposedly advanced like computer chess game, but it now looks like something you wouldn't give a toddler.
Yeah. You think, oh my god, he's on a Spectrum or an Amstrad.
Exactly, yeah. But no, it's cool because, as you say, it does kind of get the point that it's supposed to be an advanced futuristic building. And again, that's one of the other themes that some critics have identified as the sort of railing against modernization and against globalization and people, sort of foreigners coming over. And, you know, there's even the hint in the movie, isn't there, of we're flexible. We didn't get you with Pearl Harbor, but we did with tape decks, and Japan sort of taking over the business side of American life. So again,
there is that slight undercurrent where John asks Takagi if you know, he didn't know that they had Christmas in Japan.
Exactly. And then the fact that even the villains are kind of the German, basically, which is like, you know, who fear of foreigners, and we're still a little bit nervous about the whole World War situation, even 40 years after at this point and whatnot. So I think there's a little bit of that. But then, as you say, it's a question of wanting. But then again, I would argue they're equally critical of kind of the American way of life in this particular decade and time, because through the character of Ellis, the way that he's just completely, you know, he does an awful lot of coke, and he's just arrogant and ultimately ends up foolishly getting killed. Spoilers.
But they do hammer those American stereotypes on when Hans later on in the movie is talking about, you know, John Wayne riding off into the sunset with Grace Kelly.
Definitely, we'll get there for sure, because that, again, you're absolutely right, and that's the point, isn't it? About that could feed into is this about recapturing that A, masculinity, and B, sense of like American pioneering Old West spirit or whatever. So
yeah. I mean, he does start off as a character very flawed, and as you said, with the airplane scene right at the start, they instill that in you. He doesn't just. He doesn't start off like a Bond film or any of these other action sequences where he's in some kind of foreign country shooting things up, you know, walking away from an explosion. It shows right at the start he's a very flawed character. He's divorced from his wife. His wife's trying to keep a distance from him. He's scared of flying. You know, he's kind of an outsider.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it is worth noting that and I know I kind of skipped over it, but the film, it's kind of brave and unexpected to start with the character literally terrified. I mean, it focuses on his knuckles as he's gripping the seat, and it's like, it's a surefire way of pointing out, yeah, this guy's just mortal. He's kind of an everyman. He's not like superhuman. Nothing phases him. The guy's scared to fly, even, you know. So
yeah, I think that played into the strength of Bruce Willis at the time, because they weren't sure about him as a leading man. I mean, I was a fan because I watched him Moonlighting, but I mean, apart from a couple of earlier movies, he never really made it big. But if you compare how he's portrayed in that, and then imagine somebody else like Stallone or Schwarzenegger, you would not buy the whole thing about, oh, he's scared of flying. You'd automatically taken out of it, because in their films previous to this, they never really showed any weakness. So if they're sat there gripping the arms of the airplane, you wouldn't buy it as much as this kind of scrawny guy, really, that for the most part is unknown, other than, as I say, to people that's watched him in Moonlighting or maybe seen the movie Blind Date.
Yeah, completely. And yeah, I did kind of read up about that, and you're absolutely right. Like I said, Willis wasn't really, he'd done one film and it had more or less bombed. And he was known as a TV actor because of Moonlighting, the kind of rom-com. And, you know, at that stage, TV actors making it in Hollywood were failing, basically. I mean, there was attempts by the likes of Shelley Long and a couple of others to break out of being TV stars into movies, and they just weren't happening. And the fact that this was 20th Century Fox, their big like summer blockbuster attempt, and they hired what was effectively a virtual unknown and gave him a ridiculously high sort of, for the time, payment, which I think shocked a lot of people. People were kind of, as I was reading about it, people were genuinely sort of freaked out by this, and kind of, he was given, let's say, $5 million for the role, comparable to like most other big names at the time. But the brass at 20th Century Fox said, well, part of it was because you needed that everyman persona, which feeds into what you were saying. But I do remember reading and found it a bit odd that like the marketing and everything around the film changed because people weren't really enamored with Willis as an idea, and that's why you have the posters.
They tried to hide him as much as possible from the posters.
Yeah, I was going to say the posters that sort of, the studios say that it's because the Plaza is as much a character as anyone else, but they showed like the tower and no actor and Bruce Willis's name in kind of small font. But then it is, you almost kind of track what happened with this film through the marketing, because as soon as it hit big and Bruce Willis is getting that huge response, all of a sudden his face appears in the posters again, and all of a sudden they're selling it on like Bruce Willis's face as big as the tower and everything. So it's a fascinating look at that.
Yeah, now they're selling movies on him, and he's only in it for about 5 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's one of the biggest movie stars, arguably, whether or not he behaves like it necessarily at times. But
yeah. But enough said about that.
Yeah, we'll not get into that. I'm not Kevin Smith. But yeah. So yeah, we'll hit back onto the film with the Christmas watch part, whatever we're up to now. I think it's Argyle starts whistling Jingle Bells, and we cut back to the Christmas party. So again, re-emphasizing everything. They point out that there are, again, it's just said in kind of almost background dialogue, but you hear that there's several floors of the building still under construction, which is going to become important for improvised weapons and things later on, you know. So I think that's an important thing that they drop on us, but you have to listen for it. Let's see. And then, as I said, you encounter Ellis and know that he's a bit of a jerk, and he's kind of caught out snorting coke from a desk in his office, and has the nervous reaction to, oh, this is Mr. McLean, he's a cop kind of thing, you know. And then, like you said, it's that scene of, I didn't know they had Christmas in Japan and whatever, which again, Christmas watch, mention of Christmas, and you do see a little Santa ornament on the shelf behind them. So yeah, and then of course you get what I've labeled here, Chekhov's Rolex, which is that Ellis is like, Holly, show him your Rolex. It's so cool. And he's, I'm sure I'll see it later. And I had no idea how many times I've seen this film, at least 4 or 5 times. And yet every time I forget that is actually like a crucial plot point at the very end.
It wasn't until I watched it today. And I remember that he takes the watch off at the end. But when he brings it up, even now I'm sat there thinking, what's that line for?
Yeah, now you know.
It blindsides me every time. I don't know if that's my rapidly approaching senility or what, but I never pick up on it.
No, I'm the same. I mean, when I was making the notes, I was like, oh, I suppose this scene is to show the increasing like tension of the class divide that's developed between Holly and John and whatever. And maybe it is on a thematic level, but ultimately it's just more about, no, it's setting up that she's wearing a Rolex so that he can unclip it later and save her. Yeah. So yeah, fair enough. I do love, and this is a bit of praise for, I guess, McTiernan and maybe the editing as well, that the tension of the camera just slowly trailing the vehicles and people and stuff. So you're looking suspiciously as an audience member on everything. And then it's just still blindsides you with the sheer shock of the guy like making basketball references and stuff and then just pulling out a gun and shooting the guy in the lobby out of nowhere. And it's so shocking. It's like a blood spray and everything. And you're like, wow, this is... yikes, what just happened? I'm caught completely. I was nervous, and yet I'm still somehow caught off guard. And expert direction. I mean, films try and fail to do that kind of thing all the time. So kudos to them for that. And,
he gets away with how callous some of these robbers actually are.
Yeah, because there's almost a dark humor, as I said, the way that like the guy's talking about basketball and he's like, oh, he takes the shot, and then the guy shoots him in the head and he's like, oh yeah, done, and whatever. And I was like, wow, this
just leaps over and kicks him out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. But again, another directing note, I love that you are in no doubt immediately who the leaders of the terrorists are, because firstly, Alan Rickman's screen presence, even when he doesn't talk, is just immense. And secondly, the camera makes a point of lingering and tracking Hans Gruber the entire way through. So you're like, oh yeah, this is the guy to watch, this dude. So, yeah. One thing I didn't love, just to be slightly critical for a second, is the music in the movie. I just thought it was very generic, like, now we're ramping up tension, now this is supposed to be this. And
I used to think that, but I paid a lot more attention to it today because I wanted to pick up how prevalent the Ode to Joy motif was throughout.
Yeah.
And instead, I picked up on other little things like, I don't know if you noticed, and this again enforces the Christmas theme of the movie to me, is it goes into a subtle walking in a winter wonderland.
I did. I wasn't sure if that was just me hearing things, but I'm pleased that you've confirmed that, because I thought that, and then I was like, oh, maybe it's just a coincidence. But again, as I was reading about it after watching the film, I did read that there's a lot of use of like sleigh bells and stuff in the film, which is apparently to undercut the traditional meaning, because it's always at like the more tense or terrorist or bad guy focused scenes and stuff. And I was like, oh, see, I wasn't even picking up on that really. It was just mainly moments where I was like, yes, I get it, I'm supposed to be tense here. And there's a climactic moment at the end. I think it's when Hans is about to fall, where it just gets really like aggressively just blaring the same two notes at you over and over again, and I was like, this is just distracting. I don't love this.
Yeah, it does hammer it home a little too much sometimes.
Yeah,
absolutely. There is one bit which I had to double check. The bit, I know we're flashing forward. It's just to discuss the Michael Kamen situation, but the bit at the end where the Alexander Godunov character comes out with the gun after you think he's already dead.
At the very end.
And Al ends up shooting him. That entire section of music, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the work of James Horner.
Yes, from Star Trek mainly, yeah.
Yeah, that could have been ripped from Wrath of Khan. It's that same kind of motif in that movie and later on in Aliens. And
it's weird that you say that because parts of this movie are actually from an unused first draft for Aliens, the actual music of it. I was reading somewhere. So, yeah, maybe that's why you were getting that sense.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think it's because they shared the same studio, because obviously it's not the same composer necessarily or anything, but yeah, because they were kind of on file, it was a first draft that was considered it wouldn't suit the tone or it wasn't good enough for the composer for Aliens. So, and it's not everything, but there's huge parts where it says, if you listen out, it's from the unused first draft of the score to Aliens, and some of it you can hear in the Aliens trailer, apparently, the first trailer, obviously.
Right.
So,
yeah,
like, okay, fair enough.
I picked up on it, and I had to go and double check because he said Michael Kamen, and I thought, I wonder if James Horner had anything to do with it, but I couldn't find anything where he was credited. So it's interesting to know that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been changed enough that you wouldn't necessarily have to. And like I said, it's because, it's all 20th Century Fox IP and whatever else. But yeah, it's just one of those weird things, because I'm not nearly musically gifted enough to notice these kind of things, but there'll be people listening that are, who would be like, oh, and I'm sure I heard this. And so, yeah, definitely worth noting, 100%. Excuse me. So
the only reason I know it is I used to collect soundtracks, and Wrath of Khan and Aliens, which were the ones that I had on my CD. Well, it was vinyl back then. I had on my player most of all. So when I hear something like that, it just...
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. They're two of my favorite soundtracks and movies as well. So yeah. Brilliant. Excellent. Awesome. So yeah, getting back to the film again, keeping up with the pace and everything. It's shocking to me how quickly it gets into like John hearing the gunshots and the carnage and everything, and we're straight into action. And there's even a shot of like a topless woman that is it a hooker or a member of the staff? Who knows? Having to quickly cover up and run off. And yeah, the camera work all of a sudden goes for a neck, and there's just blood and noise and everything. And I was like, wow, it's kind of weird how shockingly it's just like from calm to chaos, I guess. But I liked it.
Yeah, it does lull you into a little bit of you've seen it time and time and time again since then, but it lulls you into a false sense of security. And maybe that's why they included that scene with, between Holly and John. And
maybe
to give you that impression that it was going to be like that, so that when the action does kick in, it's all the more shocking, especially, as we said, with the callousness of it.
Yeah, I think, because we'd already had the one scene where that had happened, I think as well, I was kind of conditioned to be like, oh, that's the big shock moment. And then the film sort of calmed down from there before then doing another shock. So it was like, wow, okay, we're not letting up. It's weird. But yeah, I just love as well Hans Gruber's speech. Again, Alan Rickman just has presence from the off. And this was his first movie, basically, is just even more impressive. I can see why, he got a lot of accolades and praise off the back of the film. Even to people that were critical of it. I do kind of love that the motivations of the bad guys are a little bit unclear and not super important at first. But it is kind of pointing out that they don't really have any righteous allegiances or anything. Ultimately, the result is just they're greedy and they wanted to rob someone, which, cool. Awesome. It avoids a lot of potential pitfalls, I guess. Looking at you, Rambo 3, where he's helped by the future Taliban. But whatever.
That's then what is it, license to kill, where that happens as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I do love that they completely undercut that in the scene again later, but we sometimes do dot around. But later when he's like, I demand you free like all these people in Northern Ireland and this Asian Dawn group, and then he just covers the phone. I just heard about them in Time magazine or something. He's got no allegiance whatsoever. And even his like former terrorist group have disowned him, and he's been expelled from them. It's revealed on the news,
Yeah.
So, in terms of Christmas watch, there's a little mini Christmas tree in the control room. got to keep up the Christmas watching, keep it going. It's a really good scene when they are talking with Takagi, and it's kind of again the tension of like you've seen it a million times, and I think they play on the cliche of like when him saying you're just going to have to kill me. You still don't expect that's going to literally be what happens. One thing that's weird about the scene that I didn't know until reading about it afterwards is that you have to be shown John's point of view and see that he doesn't get a clear shot at any point of Gruber, because otherwise the scene later when he's pretending to be a hostage with the American accent would never have worked. And I was like, oh yeah, that would have completely... And apparently that's all a reshoot because they realized oh crap. Yeah, exactly. It didn't even occur to me that he should really have seen him down there. And apparently, like I said, it was a reshoot because at points it was... the story goes that somebody heard Rickman doing an American accent in like the catering trailer or whatever, and was like, "Ooh, we'll write this into the film as this idea." But at that point, they'd already filmed the scene where he kills Takagi, and McClane had watched, and it was like, "Well, that kind of blows things, doesn't it?" So as I said, they reshot it and made sure that you see his point of view that he's obscured the entire time. So I was like, "Well, that's clever," but I wouldn't even have noticed apparently.
And for me, that's why it's a good film. You get that caught up in it, you don't notice these sort of things.
No, not at all. No, it's good, and that's how the film's able to grab you and even fool you on a couple of occasions, I think, as well. So, but again, talking about like how tightly plotted it is, and credit to the writing, it sets up the ticking clock narrative that you get in a lot of these movies, but it's cleverly done by like there's 7 layers of security to get through, so they have to do that rather than like waiting for an escape or anything. So it makes logical sense in a lot more of a narrative way. And again, related back to like McClane being the everyman, I do like that he doesn't like, he more or less lets Takagi get killed because he couldn't do much about it, and then even has the argument with himself, which, nobody really talks to themselves, and it's a bit of a cinematic trope, but I do kind of like that he at least argues with himself about why didn't you do something? Oh, I would have been killed too, and so you have that out through the character. That's when you get the setup, of course, that we've got the difficult 7th layer of security to get through eventually that we'll get to, but again, that's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina when we get there, unfortunately, but not to worry. Like I said, he sees the sirens and stuff in the distance, and he's like, "Oh yes, come on! Oh, I'm gonna, what's it? Because it's fire engines. I'm gonna kiss your Dalmatian." And then he just sees them turn around and go away, and he's, "Oh, you stupid motherfuckers!" And then, as I think, the only hint you get that anything's happened is that when the guy comes in, he goes, "The fire's been called off, so you can come out. No one's gonna help you." And I was like, "Oh, okay, fair enough." But again, it's cliche, but I kind of love it the way that it's funny and just really well scripted when he's like kicking the crap out of the guy, and the dude's like, "You won't do anything. You're a policeman. Policemen have rules." And he's like, "Oh yeah, so my superiors keep telling me, so my chief keeps telling me, I'm just not
my captain."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it didn't even occur to me that he would naturally be looking for a pair of shoes, but the fact that it takes the time to be like, "Oh, millions of terrorists in the world, I'd kill one with feet smaller than my sister, so the shoes don't fit." That's brilliant.
And I love that. I love little things like that, like you see in that.
It is little ones,
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Because normally you watch these movies and you watch these TV shows, and they take someone behind the wall or the corner, beat them up, steal the clothes, and get on with the next point. So when you see someone and they beat someone up and they're actually the wrong size clothes, I know it's just a minor thing, but I love it. I love things like that. Just these little points. It's not what I would call realistic in any sense, but it just adds that little touch that you would think, knowing my look, I'd end up getting the guy with the shirt that's too tight, or the shoes that don't fit.
Yeah, absolutely. But it adds to character as well. You know what I mean? That John's like,
we've all been John McClane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
awesome.
We've got not all our days like that, but we've got these days.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, that is the ultimate bad day, is the movie's point, I guess, isn't it? But that's why I think it gets increasingly ridiculous the more times it happens to him. By the 5th time. But But yeah, so as I say, the next scene is it's a big pivotal moment for Christmas Watch and for the film itself, because John spies a kind of Santa doll with a little hat on and uses it to dress up the corpse that he's just accidentally broken the neck of, so that he sends it down in the elevator or lift if you're English, and it opens up and you get that really famous shot of the guy with it's written in what I presume is blood, and it says, "Now I have a machine gun, ho ho ho." So yes.
Oh. fault.
Exactly. So you can't tell me that that's not Christmassy. Come on, he's wearing a Santa hat, and it says, "Yeah." But I love that he's not really. He gets a bit more cagey about it, but at this point, he's just like, "Oh, I've killed the guy, and he had a machine gun, so now I've got one, so I'm be scared," kind of thing. I was like, "Oh, that's one of the rare times that he is that kind of cocky action hero," but I still kind of love it anyway.
Yeah. And you root for him at this point because you think, oh, he's leveling up. He could actually do this.
Yeah, I think that exactly. That might be the point. You're right. Is that it's at this point you're like, oh, he's getting stronger and better, and he's going to do it, kind of thing. It is cliche as heck, though, that the guy that he kills has a brother that's in the terrorist group. That's like, now it's just a personal vendetta. Like, bless you. Sometimes you do fall into these kind of 80s action film type cliches, don't you? But it gives you some good moments.
But as a credit to the how to me how good the script is and how good the direction is. Even the minor characters, even the generic bad guys, the ones that don't have a speaking role, you kind of pick up on their character just from like the glances that those two that's in the lift with Goodenough, and they give each other a glance and things like that. You kind of pick up on the characters that don't speak. It's the characterization is very, very good to me for an action film. Normally, they're just cannon fodder.
Yeah. I agree with you on that one. Absolutely. But I also love that as much as it is a cliche idea, the thing that I like about it is that it feeds into the menace of Hans Gruber, that he's like, look, we'll do this, and then you can, search the rubble for him all you want. But in the meantime, we're going to stay calm and we're going to stick to the plan. And I was like, okay, that's fair enough. So the kind of henchman is relegated to personal vendetta status, and the lead guy is still menacing and like, yo, I don't even care. I'm just going to steal the money and do off and kill a bunch of people, So yeah, it's good on that level.
It sets up like different little plot arcs within the film itself, and it's all the better for it. Yeah. But even to his brother was killed, but at that point when you didn't know it was his brother, and he comes in and he's trying to get all the wiring sorted while McClane's on the phone to Argyle, and you see that tension between him and Goodenough, because while he's doing the wiring, Goodenough just comes in with a chainsaw and just cuts through the entire
pipes or whatever. Yeah, I did make a note of that because I was like, that gives you everything you need to know about this character to start with, which is that he's just a blunt instrument, basically. He's like,
exactly, yeah.
I'm just gonna.
But you see that little conflict between the bad guys, and normally in these action movies, that would have to you'd have to have some exposition for that. Like, you did that to me. You don't just see people. Well, you didn't back then. You didn't just see people bickering between each other as if they do know each other.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a couple of scenes that I'll get to later with that as well, where the bad guys have their moment to get a bit of character and do some cool stuff as well. But yeah, where was I? So yeah, again, it's a little thing, but I do love the fact that the way that John navigates like where he's been and stuff is by eyeballing a little dirty calendar that one of the presumably like construction workers or whatever has pinned to a locker. So that's how he knows he's retracing his steps and stuff, because he like touches the nudie woman on the calendar. Like, that is just chef's kiss level of world building right there. I absolutely adore the radio transmission when he gets to the roof. The bad guys can hear it, but the woman at the dispatch or whatever's having none of it, and like, oh, you've called 911. This is for, an emergencies only. And then that great line, no shit, lady, do I sound like I'm ordering a pizza? Which is brilliant. Yeah. That's John McClane right there, isn't it? But awesome. So then we introduce my probably favorite character of the movie, which is Sergeant Al Powell. Again, cliche as heck that he's got a pregnant wife, and he's got his own motivations and his own backstory, but I still kind of love it anyway. But yeah, the fact that he's obsessed with Twinkies that he's buying tons supposedly for his wife, and then later on he just has out of nowhere, and again it could have stopped the film dead, but has a conversation about it. Oh man, this 1,000,000-year-old Twinkie, what's in it? And then just lists the ingredients in a Twinkie to him. Yeah, it's so weird, but yeah.
He's such a good character, Al. You root for him right from the word go, and you don't normally get that sometimes. Sometimes there's like this little tweak or that little, and you just think, not sure. But again, I'm going back to everybody in this film just plays their role so well.
Absolutely. And one of the things that the film's been praised for, and which I kind of did sort of retrospectively realize as well, is how the treatment of race is kind of is a non-issue. That two of the biggest heroes in the movie are Al and Argyle, who kind of help him and save the day and whatever. But even a couple of terrorists are kind of people of color, and it's never made a huge deal out of or anything. Yeah. It's just kind of it's just there, and it's just a thing, and they're never classed as less capable of being evil or good or anything. So, but yeah, I love that Al is just not your stereotypical action hero either. In as much as that John McClane's not like steroids and muscles and stuff, you know, Al is as much the hero of the movie, and he's kind of an overweight, you know, desk jockey cop, but hey, he still gets his moment to shine, you know. So
yeah, he comes across as, you know, that classic underdog, so that later on in the movie, you really do you kind of cheer for him.
Completely. Absolutely. So yeah, getting into the next scene, that's probably the most famous, or one of the most famous scenes of the movie, because it's just all spectacular action as he's kind of McClane's on the roof getting chased and shot at, and goes through the fan and then back to the little nudie calendar, and it's a little moment in the middle of all this like chaotic action, but I love that he tries to work out how deep the elevator shaft goes by just kicking the vent cover off and then listening until he hears it actually clatter on the floor. I was like, that's stopping things for a little moment, but it's so important for character to show that he's like smart enough to realize these things, and to also give us a moment of like, these are the stakes. And it's so tense when he starts scaling down, but he's using like the gun strap, and the gun's like almost buckling, giving way within the lift doors and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is intense. But again, I was reading as well that the fall that he kind of has to grab onto a lower vent was completely accidental, and it was because the stuntman fell performing the stunt.
Oh, really?
But they kept it because they're like, oh, that fits John McClane, you know, unlucky, tries to do this, fails on the first attempt, and then gets lucky and catches a sort of lower down vent. So what the heck, we'll just keep it in. And I was like, that's awesome, man.
To just reach for the ledge and grab it.
Yeah, he was supposed to just swing across, grab the ledge, and get there kind of first time and be fine. So yeah, actually, like I said, it's an accident.
Wow.
The stuntman fell.
Much better then.
Yeah, completely. Absolutely. I mean, like you say, happy accidents that kind of add to a film. It's great, isn't it? So yeah. And some of the most iconic lines, of course, when he does get in there, and he's getting in there, and he you know, Hans wants him just neutralized, but he starts crawling through the vents, and he's like, you get the lines of like, get together, we'll come to the coast, get together, have a few laughs, and now I know what a TV dinner feels like. Again, dated, but still pretty amusing. I do like
the number of quotable lines from this film are
it's immense, isn't it?
Wikipedia.
I think that's the thing as well, the cultural impact that the film has, because I remember like quotes from it turning up in everything from like Brooklyn Nine-Nine to Family Guy to whatever. So I was like, oh yeah, that's from Die Hard. I remember that, you know? Yeah. But yeah, it's awesome. And what was it? Where was I? Yeah, again, just switching on sort of film critic brain for a moment. I love that when they're sort of supposed to be moody scenes of tension, you often get like smoke and steam just going on its own way and kind of covering and obscuring. And that is something that I think it was De Bont again, but whoever it was that was responsible was like, we just let these things happen. It wasn't pre-planned. It wasn't like we have smoke machines and whatever. It was using the environment to your advantage and letting things be a bit more naturalistic in that way, which really helps. And I like that you're left in no doubt how John's being kind of trailed by the bad guys, because you just see all the splatters of blood that he's leaving behind as well, which is like understandable, really. But yeah. And how tense and frustrating is the scene, though, when Al's investigating and John's just like at the top window, like, come on, dude, who's driving this car, Stevie Wonder?
Yeah. Oh, when you see him driving away, the first time you watch it, you see him drive away, you think, no! And it's not until the body hits.
Yeah, exactly. But that's such a good moment. I mean, the fact that they take the time to build that tension by having him go in there, and then the fake sort of guard, like, I thought you'd be listening to me and you calling me, and I've got money on Notre Dame in this game, and you're slowly following Al, and you're like, he's gonna find something, and he's like, screw this, I'm going.
The Huey Lewis guard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, as you say, that at that point you're so deflated, you're like, he's gone, what an idiot. And then you just get the body landing on his car in the sheer shock, and the fact that again it's 0 to 100 the way he's like, oh man, I'm being fired at, what's going on? And then everything just goes to absolute shit. Which is great.
And then we get that other classic line, the welcome to the party, pal.
Welcome to the party, pal. I love it. Absolutely. As he's kind of looking through the smashed window. Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's great. Such a good movie. But yeah, then we get the scene that I was alluding to earlier when we're talking about like even the henchman having a little bit of character, which is when he's McClane's in the room and the guy runs in and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." He's like, "Put the gun down." "I will, but I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." And then another guy runs in behind him. He's like, "Duck," tries to shoot him. McClane shoots him. The other guy starts getting up on a table, getting all cocky, like, "Oh, when you have a chance to kill someone, do it." And then does just shoot up through the table and give it. "Thanks for the advice, pal." You know, it's so clever and so well written and just well rounded. I think so. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I do like that when he does do that, he's you know, it is what you'd say. You would say something, you know, "Thanks for the advice." You wouldn't come out with these corny one-liners, one of these, you know, quips that you would find in what were de rigueur in action movies at the time.
Yeah, like the Schwarzeneggers and stuff of the moment, you know, let off some steam or whatever it is that he's on about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. It's cool. But yeah, I just love that. Al basically becoming as kind of frustratedly blasé as John when he's like, "These guys have turned my car into Swiss cheese." You know? It's just colourful metaphors all the way. I love it. And I do love that Hans Gruber just remains completely calm as there's like, you know, dozens of cop cars pulling up and he's like, "That's fine. We knew it was going to happen. It's just accelerated the timetable a bit." It's like, this dude just does not get phased, does he?
No, he comes across as just cool and calculated. And there's no wonder he got such recognition for this.
Absolutely, because it comes off as so threatening and menacing that you just cannot phase him. He's a complete sociopath, you know. But again, switching back to Christmas Watch for a second, you do get a Merry Christmas from the Fate Guard as Al does initially leave, and Al does sing the first few verses of Let It Snow. So
yeah,
just to remind us that it is still Christmas. And yeah, then we get, of course, because John's on the radio, you get John and Hans having the conversation where he reveals kind of the knowledge and that he has the detonator. And I love how cheeky kind of McClane gets to, you know what I mean? And then, as you said, feeding into the Americana cliche type ideas, maybe, is the you know, you're just another American that's seen too many cowboy movies, and you know, I'm partial to Roy Rogers myself. "Oh, you can't win, Mr. Cowboy." "Yeah, well, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker." You know?
Yeah,
it's great. Slight detour story I have about this is just the many variations on that phrase that have had to be sort of come up with to fit around like TV screenings of Die Hard.
God, I remember that.
Obviously, you can't really. Can you remember what specific one? There's a couple of hugely important
wasn't
ones.
one called Muddy Funster or something?
Very probably. The two. Yeah, the two most famous ones I'm aware of is Yipee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon, which makes no sense, or slightly more colourfully, Yipee-ki-yay, Melon Farmer, which is almost better. Melon Farmer.
What the hell?
It makes no sense whatsoever, but it is brilliant, isn't it?
When you sent me a message, you've just explained one. When you sent me a message earlier and you said, "Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon."
Yeah.
What the hell is that about?
That was the kind of, that was the TV, you know, Emmy or whatever rating version that the American networks used to always show. Was dubbed over Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon. It's weird. I love it. This is, again, not really related to this film, but if you have a chance, if you have the DVDs or Blu-rays of the Cornetto trilogy from Edgar Wright, he has, as a special feature on them, he has like the dubbed over versions of more of the strong scenes and the things that they used for the scenes when they're kind of blaspheming or cussing or whatever. And there's like extended runs of what they actually used, and some of them are absolutely hilarious. So it's just endless scenes of a poorly dubbed like Simon Pegg just going, "Oh, cheese and rice."
Oh God. I remember that. Did you? I'm digressing here. I don't mean to. But,
that's okay.
The TV version of Ghostbusters.
I never did. No, what was that?
They cut out the blowjob ghost scene.
Oh well, obviously the blowjob ghost would go, yeah.
But the entire exchange later on when they're in the mayor's office, and
this man has no dick. It's the best part of the movie.
When he says it was cut off by Dickless here, and he says it was cut off by Wally Wick here, and I'm watching. I'm like, because I'd seen it a couple of times in the cinema. I know, Wally Wick. What the hell is Wally Wick?
It's amusing, but yeah, I was watching on Blu-ray, so I got the full uncut motherfucker experience. Dear. Yeah, again, it's at this point that we get introduced to kind of the creepy news guys and stuff, and I made a note of like, is this a subplot too many? Maybe because it just seems almost unnecessary. It's to give Holly her hero moment at the end, I suppose, but otherwise it just feels like we're distracting from what's actually important and what's really happening.
It does. And William Atherton does play a very, very good creep.
Well, again, speaking about Dickless,
yeah.
He does, and but again, at this point, you've already, I don't know if you've established them, but by the end of the film, you've already got, the dude from the Breakfast Club, who's like Al's boss, who's being a dick, and the two FBI agents who are, complete assholes. Johnson and Johnson, no relation, yeah.
I love some of the lines. I mean, I love Paul Gleason. He always plays things really dry in this and Trading Places. I just love the whole thing. Again, I'm digressing, and I don't mean to jump ahead, but
no, go for it.
When the FBI guys blow up, and his line, "Well, we're going to need a couple more FBI guys, I guess."
Just I made a note of that, yeah.
Yeah, just the way he delivers that. I just want to. I mean, he's been an asshole all the way through, but I just want to. I wanted to high five the actor for the way he delivered that line.
It's the blasé way it's done as well. That's the thing that makes it, because it not that the line itself isn't funny, but the way he delivers it is, well, I guess we're going to need a couple of FBI guys. It's just, he seems so sincere and so sort of, they're gone.
But again, the script, I don't know how many drafts it went through, but to me, apart from a couple of scenes that we said, like the exposition, the minor characters, even their lines are really good. Like, I mean, I'm probably biased because he's my favorite character. But early on, when the phone gets cut off, and Argyle just looks at the phone and just says, "You know the number, use it," and just puts it down and just carries on partying.
I didn't even pick up on that scene, but yeah. Okay, awesome. That's cool.
And there is another line. I'm not going to mention it yet, but there is a line that I've heard for the first time today in all these years of watching it, and it's just. It blew me away. I just thought, how ludicrous is it that I've missed this all this time? But I'll go into that when we get to that point.
That's fair enough. And I'll bring something up here then. It's very slightly ahead, but not by far, which is that one of the reasons, again, when I was reading about the film, that there's a lot of kind of, I guess, reality to the minor characters and stuff, is that they were encouraged to improvise bits and pieces, even if they were like, henchman number 4 or whatever. So I absolutely had no memory of and bust out laughing at the kind of the Asian looking bad guy when he's like, he sets up shop and then he just eyeballs like the chocolate bar like 5 or 6 times and then steals it. It was like, and when I read that wasn't scripted, it was an improvisation by the actor, I was like, oh, that is legendary. I hope that guy got extra pay for that day.
Because normally up until that point you'd just seen him as this like generic Asian thug in things like Big Trouble in Little China and stuff like that. So when I saw that, I didn't know that was improvised.
Yeah, no, I didn't until I read it, and I was like, that is genius that he just improvised that, and that the director was like, yeah, leave it in, why not? It's funny, But
I also like the fact, I don't know if you noticed, one of the thugs turned up in Ghostbusters 2.
The guy who plays Vigo's in this film somewhere as well, one of the thugs, I think. So is that who you're talking about? I had no idea it was him until I read it. But, yeah, so again, we get a lot of kind of like introducing us to a bunch of jerks between the news dude and Paul Gleason's, the cop boss, chief character, whatever you want to call him. But I do love that it re-emphasizes kind of Al's hero status and that he's the one smart enough to pick up on that John's a cop, not a bartender. He gets that hunch and stuff. And but the fact that that's kind of intercut with Holly getting a chance to be a bit of a hero and like giving as good as she gets back to Hans with like, oh, you put me in charge when you killed my boss. I wouldn't like to do this because too close to you and whatever. The fact that Holly gets a moment of agency, as it were, but it's just to do women's duties because it's very much like there's a pregnant lady that needs a couch and you need to start taking us to the bathroom. And I was like, oh, she could have got more to do than just like, this is the woman's role kind of stuff, I guess. But yeah, maybe that's just me being harsh.
I'm wondering if that's intentional, that apart from John and Holly and Al, the majority of people around them, they're either idiots or they're just wankers, basically, to put not too fine a point on it. I wonder if that was intentional to just reinforce how heroic the flawed people are that take center stage.
it's almost like that idea from the horror movies, isn't it? Where it's like everything's completely ineffectual apart from the lead. Everyone else is stupid or incompetent or just a jerk that's hindering you in some way. But I think it also it's to keep it humorous and light because, like you say, it's even the ones that you might think are vicious or evil are kind of like amusing with it. There's a dark comedy to them.
Yeah, and it's like when the FBI guys. I'm Agent Johnson. This is Special Agent Johnson. No relation.
Absolutely. I was reading as well that the reason it's the black Agent Johnson that says that is because they were scared it was racist if the white guy had said it. I was like, really? That's a little bit too worrying over nothing, but fair enough. But talking about them, and again, it skips forward a little bit, but my favorite line of theirs is just, this reminds me of Saigon. Haha, I was in junior high, dipshit. Again, a little moment that has nothing to do with anything, but it's taken down the kind of Vietnam War movies or whatever of the period, and that machismo with like, yeah, that's in the past, forget it. So yeah, it's great. Next scene is first of all, you get a Christmas watch because the guy starts to quote "'Twas the night before Christmas" as the cops are coordinating their response. But this is where they kind of get their armored RV, and they're like the bad guys are running like rocket launchers and stuff around, and you get that epic like fireball explosion as he shoots the armored car, and a brief moment of John like trying to negotiate, I suppose, with Hans and saying like, look, you've made your point, let them back off, and Hans is just brutal and having none of it, and like, nope, fire again. Which reinforces his like dickishness, I guess. But again, even after that, when it's really kind of gruesome and horrible that you see the like wounded cops and stuff, but a moment later you get the news guy watching the fireball just going like, "Tell me you got that," which again apparently was improvised. Which was like, wow. Those are key to undercut the tension that just weren't in the script at all,
But it's like there's also that line. He says, "Well, the quarterback is toast." And he's an asshole. You despise him, but you can't help but kind of find that little delivery funny.
Yeah, that was definitely improvised as well. That was the other thing that I'd read by that particular actor. That he's just, but as you say, it feeds into like he's just being a jerk at this point, isn't he? But yeah. But again, in the midst of all this, nobody really loses their dark humor because, like, when John blows up the entire floor with C4. And everything, and that's when you get the news guy being, did you get that? He asks like Al, "Is there a fire down there?" And Al's like, "No, but it's going to need a paint job and a shitload of screen doors."
Screen doors, yeah.
It's great, and then again, just the interplay in the scripting, but the scene, even though they're not in person, but on the radio between like Deputy Chief, whatever his name, Robinson and John, where he's like, "Listen, we don't want your help. Yeah, look, I'm not the guy who got butt fucked on national TV, Dwayne."
Yeah.
It's great. And then even Al, like, "How are you doing, John?" "I'm feeling pretty fucking unappreciated."
Yeah.
So
I
again, it's relatable.
Yeah, I love that whole scene where he says, where Al's talking to Paul Gleason, and he just says, "Why don't you wake up and smell what you shoveling?"
Yes.
And there's not. Look. There's not one person on the planet that's not wanted to talk like that to their boss at some point or other.
Absolutely. I love it, and I love the fact that he still stands at the ground because he's like, "Look, if you want to leave, you can go." And he's like, "No, sir, I'm right where I want to be," or something like that.
You can drag me away.
Yes, exactly. It's awesome. This is the scene, of course, where Ellis tries to play the hero, thinks he's going to be clever with his cocky negotiation tactics. Again, apparently, Hans Bubby, I'm Your White Knight was another improvisation by the dude who played Ellis, which, again, it's become such an iconic line within itself. And this scene's just great. One thing I didn't pick up on until I was reading about it is, and again, this is testament to the film, that it doesn't make this joke on screen, but you can make it for yourself. I thought it was just product placement when they're pouring a Coca-Cola for Ellis. But apparently the idea behind it is that Ellis asked the bad guys if they had any Coke and they misunderstood, which is genius. No, me neither. But I was like, that makes, because you see him snorting at the start of the movie and naturally, it makes sense. And I was like, why is it so prominently showing you this Coca-Cola like it's a huge deal? And I was like, when I read it, I was like, of course, this makes such sense now. But it's a joke that the film doesn't bother like hammering you over the head to make. It's just there if you happen to see it,
Again, which I never tweaked.
No, me neither. But now you'll know when you watch that scene back, you'll be like,
But again, with Ellis, all the way through, the way he's been acting, he's inherently dislikable. But you can't help but feel sorry for the guy at the end, even after he's been such an arrogant dick.
Well, yeah, it's testament to the film not being as cliche that he ultimately almost does a kind of a right thing because he doesn't sell out Holly, and that shocked me. I was like, wow, the film's making pains that he's the bad guy, he's a jerk and whatever, but he's like, no, I told them you were my friend, John, and I invited you to the party and stuff, and I was like, wow, that's actually pretty fucking noble, the guy, you know.
Normally in that you would have seen a character like that shop him at the first opportunity.
Absolutely, it would have been like, I told you that, I told them you're Hollies, whatever. But even the fact that, again, it raises the stakes, the sheer futility that Ellis just gets killed anyway, despite John trying to like undo his nobility and like tell him you don't know me and whatever. He gets killed anyway, and then the sheer menace of Hans, like, I'm just going to start shooting people because sooner or later I will reach somebody you care about. It's like, oh man, it's so tense. It's just those moments that keeps you on the edge of your seat, I think. So yeah, it's awesome. So I've mentioned a few of the things that we've basically talked about, the standoff with Al standing his ground and, Hans faking a bunch of terrorists released. Then we get to a bit where it's basically them discussing they need the 7th security lock breached, but it's going to take a miracle. And Christmas watch, the line from Hans, "It's Christmas, Theo. It's the time of miracles." It's great.
Yeah, the way he delivers that, it's so light and airy.
It is. It's great, but I love that. Again, I shouldn't necessarily love it because it almost seems a bit too easy. But the fact that, again, you cut through the Merry Christmas graffiti when you see the guys on the power lines, but the idea that the FBI following the playbook is what ultimately screws them over because the 7th sort of security seal can't be broken unless the power is just cut, which is the first thing the FBI would do on that situation. Yeah. So they just completely play into it, and it's when Hans.
I give you the FBI.
Exactly, the way he delivers that line and everything as well, 100%. So yeah, it's great. So then we should probably talk about the scene, as I said, where Hans meets John and kind of improvises the American voice, and again the clever direction of showing you that he'd seen the name Billy whatever on a board somewhere. Another thing that I didn't pick up on until I read about it, because again the film doesn't make it clear, but supposedly the first indication John gets that this guy isn't being fully honest is that he offers him a cigarette, obviously. And Hans holds it the way a European would, rather than the way an American would, like between the fingers.
Oh, I
didn't pick up on that. No. Would never have gotten that at all.
Over my head.
Yeah, I mean, it would. I don't smoke or anything. I don't really know these things, but I still thought it was. Yeah, it was still a clever. I was like, oh, was he always just kind of suspicious of him or whatever? But then when you read that might have been a turning moment, I was like, okay, that's cool. That's kind of clever. I'll give you that. So
the only thing that takes me out of this film is Rickman's American accent in that part.
See, I think it's better than his German accent, personally.
Oh no, I'm. When I first heard him speak, when I first heard his actual accent after seeing Die Hard, I was shocked.
Fair enough. I think he to me, when he's trying to do the German accent that the character's meant to be, he just sounds so English and clipped. But maybe that's because I'm so used to seeing Alan Rickman in so many other things that's what you kind of subconsciously listen for, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't mind his American accent. I guess, as I said, the fact that John sees through it is at least, makes that less egregious. But I do still think it's a cool, tense scene because, again, the film suckers me into thinking like, oh crap, he's been fooled. What's going to happen here?
Yeah.
And the really, the cool moment of like, it's unloaded. Hans, what do you think? I'm stupid.
He does play against the type of these action films that you've seen so far, and I think that's why it works so well because you've seen variations on these scenes 100 times in the last few years.
Uh-huh.
And now, all of a sudden, all the scenes that you think are going to play out one way play out the exact opposite. And you're left kind of reeling, thinking, where's this going to go?
Yeah, exactly, which I love. And I love that, that when it took me a while, because, again, I didn't really remember the specific of the plot, but I was like, why is he so obsessed with these detonators again? I can't really remember. But the fact that it's like, there's almost some kind of sinister cleverness to the idea of like, well, the point was to blow up the roof, level the building, because we'll have stolen so much money that they would otherwise like track us down and chase us forever. But this way they'll think we're dead. And you know, so much for the as regards to the kind of collateral damage, who gives a shit? We're rich and we're on a beach somewhere. So I said, oh wow, that's, again, it adds to their characters of kind of why they're threatening and why they're just such jerks, I guess. But yeah. It's good, isn't it? But yeah, you get, of course, the next scene, which is the news uncovering the McClane family, which, like I said, it seems to stop the film dead a little bit, but I get that it's there so that Holly can punch William Atherton at the end, and you get a punch the air moment for her, which is it is great when it happens.
Because it really hammers home that scene, just how much of a loathsome wretch he is.
Absolutely, but it also, again, it feeds into Hans's character, I suppose, as well, as that function, because now he knows exactly who John McClane is and who Holly is to him, and that's when he says it himself, doesn't he? Oh, you're nothing but petty robbers. Well, I'm moving up to kidnapping, so you should be nicer, So
yeah, and I also like the fact that when Hans sees the broadcast, it doesn't hammer the point home. It doesn't hit you over the head with it by the kid saying, "And my dad, John." He just gathers who John is just from the look on Holly's face, and he twigs it.
Lift up the photo, doesn't he, and sees something like
exactly. It's not, it's not pushed on you, and I like that.
Awesome. Again, another really cool moment, but again, it's so funny, and I love it. Is when again, I can't remember the bad guy's name. I think it's Carl. Comes down and like smashes the tray of glasses or whatever, and Holly's just like, he's still alive. Only John can drive somebody that crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely loving it. Slightly less impressed with the way that they kind of, again, just shoehorned Al's backstory into the scene between him and McClane. Like, I accidentally shot a kid and I don't know how I can live with it. And I was like, it's almost poorly written, but saved by the acting, because Willis and Reginald VelJohnson are really good in the scene. And again, it gives you the moment at the end when Al gets the chance to pull his gun and shoot the guy and save the day, which is a very punch to the air type moment. But I just think there might have been a more subtle way to drop this in than just out of nowhere in this conversation,
Yeah. As you say, though, the acting's good. And in that scene, it never fails to make me wince when he's pulling those bits of glass out of his feet, because you believe it.
Well, yeah, apparently Bruce Willis can't watch that scene because apparently he winces every time as well. But it looked realistic to me. I tell you, I don't know whether it is or not, but yeah, it's you get a real sense, like I said, the fact that he crawls his way into that bathroom and he's so bruised and bloodied and cut up and picking glass from his feet, and you're just like, how is this dude still standing?
Yeah, I like the one towards the end where Holly sees him after he's been through all this, and he just goes, "Hi, honey," as if it's nothing. But he sounds so weary and defeated. You just can't help but laugh.
It's another improvisation, that as well, by Bruce Willis. I read quite a lot of them apparently, but yeah. Speaking of annoying things that I'm returning to, Christmas watch. When they're going to cut the power, and they say, that's crazy, it's Christmas Eve, there's thousands of people. And, the bad guys here, you get the triumphant use of the classical music and a quick Merry Christmas from them, because it unlocks the seventh seal, not to go all Ingmar Bergman. But, and again, I read that the composer, Michael Kamen, you said, didn't want to use this classical music because he said it tarnishes it using it in an action-type movie, but he was convinced to do it by McTiernan because he pointed out its use in A Clockwork Orange to underscore the uber-violence of the Droogs.
I didn't know that. I think it works incredibly well.
It does, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can see his point, I guess, Kamen, I wouldn't be so pompous about it, but at the same time, if you think it doesn't fit the tone, then fair enough. But yeah, the fact that he, convinced him, another master director used it to underscore violence, and it's very effective that way. And then, as you say, the way it's used here is just brilliant. It works. So the idea that the FBI are gonna make them sweat, then send in the helicopters, and then it'll just blow them up, and the tension of us, the audience, being one step ahead of everyone, and it's all gonna go to crap. But the fact that the film in the middle of all this stops for the chance for John to basically have his epiphany about, I've never really said I'm sorry to Holly or whatever, which is probably my favorite scene, because I was like, this is huge character growth and a massive moment, but it's so subtle and underplayed and in the middle of a bunch of action. Again, not many films will be brave enough, I think, to stop and do this for a few minutes, but yeah.
And again, if that had been played by someone else, such as Schwarzenegger or Stallone, you wouldn't have bought it.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Let me see. So they're just skipping ahead, because there's a lot of stuff that we've kind of been over. But yeah, we see on the news everything we've already touched on. The kind of the Christmas wreath on the door is there, but the McClanes are celebrating, and then the little girl reveals to Hans who he is. All of a sudden, the guy with a personal vendetta suddenly becomes an expert in kung fu when he's fighting John McClane. But what the heck, Yeah, I've mentioned Holly taken hostage, and John looking for her, but then him kind of saving everybody to go down because he knows the roof's going to blow. And how awesome is that? The iconic scene when the chopper fires at John and he just grabs the fire hose and, leaps off the top of the building while there's a huge explosion behind him.
And he's tying it up on himself. He's going, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah, I love it. But I love that as well, that it's the most heroic action hero type moment. And immediately afterwards, you cut to him and he's just saying, "Oh, please don't let me die." It's like, yes, that's exactly what you would say in that situation. It's not like, "Oh, I'm so heroic, I'm great." He's like, "Oh, shit, don't let me die from this."
And again, when he's pounding against the glass and his feet are hitting the glass and you're actually going, "Oh, God, no, his feet," because it's leaving those blood smudges all over the glass.
Yeah, and he's going to have to break through to get in, and it's like, ooh, at this point, he's getting dragged over and whatever as well. So, it's a lot. But yeah, I do love as well it comes from nowhere, but the zoom cuts to the stationery and stuff that are going to be important for that he's taped the gun to his back later.
Yeah,
and that he's gonna MacGyver some more shit basically. So that's kind of cool. This moment I can't skip over because you'll personally love it, but the fact that Argyle gets his hero moment when he stops the hacker guy.
Yeah, and
just punches him square.
And he looks so proud after he does it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll talk to. There's only the one sort of climactic scene, I guess, or two, but the face-off with Hans, which again so well directed. The fact that it's a slow build, it all the introduction of McClane is in shadow and he's only lit by the flames. And he gradually reveals just how cut up and messed up he is, and you get the reaction off Holly at first, like, "Oh God, John, what happened?"
Yeah.
So yeah, the fact that again, it's a callback, but it's so well done. The whole "you're still a cowboy." Yeah, what was it you said? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker! And then the camera panning from back to behind John, showing the gun strapped to his back, and "Duck, Holly, happy trails, Hans," and shoots him out of the window. And again, we've mentioned it, but unclipping Chekhov's Rolex to save Holly and send Hans to his doom. But I did have a brief story about this, just as a quick detour as well, which is the look of surprise on Alan Rickman's face as he falls is genuine. Because film,
I read about this.
You heard the story, yeah? It was filmed obviously against a green screen where he was falling backwards onto a mattress. But they said we'll drop you on a count of 3 and then dropped him on 2 to surprise him. So it is genuine. He said, the director said, you can't really fake that kind of shock. So there was a little bit of oh crap. So he just actually wasn't steeled and ready for it. Which I love as well.
He does work so well. The look on his face is priceless.
Again, it's an iconic scene as well, and it's just great, isn't it? So, and the slow pan down with the sparks and the kind of bearer bonds as calm settles in, and you do get all the hero moments, but they do feel kind of earned. So you get a quick, I'm Holly McClane. You get Robinson being a bit of a fuck until the last guy emerges and Al saves the day, and you get Holly punching the news guy. And as I said, one last note then, which is Christmas watch. Merry Christmas, Argyle. Heck, if this is your idea of Christmas, I've got to be here for New Year's.
Yeah.
and then Let It Snow plays, of course. So yeah. Awesome. So, which more or less I think concludes the analysis of the movie, unless there's anything that you think we'd missed that you wanted to talk about.
The only thing that, like I said, that the line that I'd never heard until tonight, where John's fighting with Carl at the end, just before he wraps the chain around his neck and pushes him off.
Yeah.
They're struggling and they're punching each other. And all of a sudden, John says, "I'm going to fucking kill you, and I'm going to cook you, and I'm going to eat you." And that just kind of blew me away. I don't know, how had I never noticed that before? That's just absurd.
I had heard that line, but I'd never really stopped and thought about it. But yeah, I guess it is kind of, to me, it was just his frustration. He's just saying any old crap as he desperately struggles,
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's kind of weird that Carl survives that kind of thing, that it never occurs to him to check, and he survives being hanged horribly to be that last shock moment. But yeah, it's earned.
And how the hell did he get down?
He's just that strong. He just unwrapped the chain and dropped.
Yeah, who cares? 2 broken shins. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, I don't think you're supposed to mind. But yeah, awesome. So just quickly then. I do have an audience response section to get into, but beforehand, and again, I've been talking about it throughout, and I said we'd answer the question, is it a Christmas movie? Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? So I'll come to you first, then DK, and ask, what are your thoughts on is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes. You either think it's a Christmas movie or you're wrong.
And what do you have to back up your stance then, if anything?
Just I don't know. Yeah, even despite, I know it sounds stupid, and people are probably going to think this guy's nuts. But despite the killing, the explosions, the blood, it feels like a Christmas movie. I mean,
Maybe just
you do get Christmas movies that are literally Christmas movies, and you don't walk away from them with the same feeling of Christmas as you do watching Die Hard. To me, it's quintessentially. I mean, yes, it's there's all the set dressing, there's the trees collapsing, and all that kind of stuff, but even though they hammer the point home, you just generally kind of, me personally anyway, I come away from it thinking, yeah, it's Christmas. Because I think a lot of people can relate to Christmases, and they're thinking, oh, Christmas, it's going to be a nice Christmas this year. And all hell breaks loose just prior to Christmas. and you kind of think, yeah, I can relate to that. He's having a bad day.
Yeah. I think the fact that it ends with all the powers of good, I suppose, triumphing in the very end and getting their heroic moments, I think feeds into that as well. Because if it had ended with any one of those kind of subplots, one of the heroes faring badly, it wouldn't necessarily be looked on as well. But I think, it ends in that way. So maybe that feeds into it.
He wouldn't have earned it if, say, Al had, bought it, or something had happened to Holly. It did end on a very high note. And because of that, you do come away from it generally feeling enthused about life, because you think, well, the bad people got what they deserved. The good people got what they deserved. Even the reporter gets slugged in the face. The FBI guys get blown up. The police chief gets kind of put in his place.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And the only three people to come through it relatively unscathed. I mean, the only what you would call an innocent party is kind of Takagi at the start.
Yeah, I guess, but yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's.
But then you're delving into what was his business practices and all that kind of thing. But other than that, the main three characters, you walk away thinking, yes.
I think that's so early in the movie as well that you've almost forgotten, I suppose, not to sound callous about Takagi. So you've never really had a chance to know him super well anyway.
I think, and I think it needed that. While he may not necessarily have been an innocent, you needed that air of innocence about him to set the ball rolling, to just show how these people, because if these people had just rolled in, they shot the security guard, that's kind of callous. But to do that to Takagi in such cold blood, which was it was set up, then you come away thinking, oof, these people are.
Well, I could understand the debate about is it a Christmas movie, because as I said, it was not intended to be. It was a summer blockbuster released in July, but tonally, you could argue that it is in the ways that we just have explored, but it doesn't make Christmas its focus in the way that a lot of quote unquote Christmas movies would. But I think the season is too much of a focus to fully ignore. There's too many references, too many visual cues and things to completely brush off. And just for the sheer cultural impact alone, the fact that it's so regarded as a Christmas movie by everyone, whether it be, as I mentioned earlier, Brooklyn Nine-Nine doing a Christmas episode that was basically a remake of Die Hard with robbers robbing someone and the cops having to stop them, and lots of references to it being like Die Hard, to the fact that you see countless memes this time of year on the social media of like, it's not Christmas until we see Hans Gruber fall from Nakatomi Plaza. And so, for that reason alone, if nothing else, I think, yes, you have to classify this, in spite of what Bruce Willis says, as a Christmas movie. So that's the debate settled. All right. So I will briefly touch on the audience responses before we talk about our own thoughts and give our own conclusions and scores, if that's okay with you. DK, the drill. What we do is we give it sort of a brief paragraph conclusion, then a score out of 5 stars. So I said basically, go on then, another random film question. What are your thoughts, opinions on festive classic Die Hard? Is it a great movie, a top 10 action film, overrated, dumb fun? And the ultimate question, is it a Christmas movie? So Paul from MCU C2C, aka Dr. Oho, says, having just watched it the other week for the first time, I think it's well deserving of its praise. It introduced much needed humor and heart into the 80s man with guns action blockbuster, and it's a cracking good story. Agreed. At Dr. 12 says, dumb, enjoyable fun. I remember sharing a house with an art film aficionado, and I watched lots of art films with him. One day I brought him Die Hard, and after watching it, he just looked shocked and didn't say a thing. The next day he was watching it by himself and taking notes. Love that. Steve Wasling at Simmerad simply says one of the very best action movies ever. And T. Viorinen says definitive 80s Christmas movie up there with Predator, Rambo, Commando, etc. Oops, I meant 80s action movie. Sorry. So there you go. So yeah, and that will wrap up the audience response section. So do you have a conclusion and a score out of 5 stars for me then, DK?
I'd agree with pretty much everything that they said. For the movie itself, it is one of my favorites, so I'm obviously biased. So I've got to give it 5 stars because I never get tired of watching.
Awesome. That's fair enough. Well, just to give you my 2 cents, I said it's the blueprint for an iconic action movie, although it's a little overlong and has some issues that we've touched on, like the music or some of the cliches and things. It's also incredibly well written, tightly plotted, and brilliantly acted. Has absolute expert direction that adds up to a truly enjoyable and engaging experience. It's rightly famous with too many great moments to list, and an overall sense of a genre classic that you can enjoy any time of year. And I said 4.5 out of 5 stars, just to touch off the perfect score. So so that obviously makes the overall podcast score for that 4.75 out of 5 for Die Hard. That will conclude this episode and this series of the podcast and our Christmas special. Once again, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody out there who's listening. And just remains for me to thank DK for joining me. DK, do you want to shout out any projects or anything that you have going on?
None at the minute. Everybody's already loaded up with trying to buy things, so I'm not going to give them any more of a burden. I'll just wish them all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Hope it's a safe, healthy, and a very stress-free one.
Absolutely. And I know that this is going on YouTube and Spotify and can be listened to anytime, but if you're watching the premiere, it'll be like 2 days before Christmas. So again, happy Christmas. Hope we're all not too stressed and we're looking forward to spending it with family and having a good time. So that's that. You can find me at Iron Mike Wilson on Twitter. I'm just my name, Michael Wilson, everywhere else. And the podcast is at podcast_screen, as you can see on the screen there. I will be back in the new year with at least a couple of episodes. I know I have a delayed Prometheus review to do, amongst other things. As to whether there'll be a full series, it'll depend on how well these sort of first 6 episodes go down and how well they pick up traction and stuff as things go on. But in the meantime, as I said, I hope we're all going to enjoy a great festive season. So one last time, in the epic words of Arnie, I'll be back and Merry Christmas.